Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast with your host, Douglas Wood, author of From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. In each episode, Doug interviews distinguished legal professionals who have masterfully navigated their careers from inception to retirement and explores the intricacies of building a successful law practice and transitioning to retirement when the right time comes. Now, let's join Doug for today's insightful discussion.
Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast, where we meet exciting lawyers who are in the middle of their practice, in the beginning and in the end, and who have been accomplished lawyers and throughout their careers, and who are distinguished guests to have on any podcast, in particular, distinguished guests for me. I'd like to introduce my first guest today is Scott Bolden. Scott is a partner at Reed Smith, a global law firm. He's among his specialties are white-collar crime, RICO, fraud, and other things. He's represented very high-level politicians, business leaders, entertainers, the athletes, you name it. He's a member of the Washington Bar Association Hall of Fame. He was named one of the most influential lawyers in law and business by Savoy Magazine and the American Business Journals. He's the Rainmaker of the Year by the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. Many of you, however, may recognize his lovely face because he's been on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and ABC, among other broadcast networks, and described as a powerful voice at the intersection of race, law, and politics. But best of all, Scott is my former partner. He and I were partners at Reed Smith for many years, and I had the privilege of and the pleasure of working with him on a number of cases, including one that I'll just say involves cigars, celebrities, and Cuba. But privilege prevents us from telling you about that particular case. So anyway, welcome, Scott. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. That was one of the case we worked on that involved those three things was one of the best cases and most fun cases I've worked on in my legal career. Thank you.
It was different. I'll say that. It was definitely different. That's when I first learned about the Trading with Enemies Act.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, yeah, Scott, you've had a fantastic career. You're still running it, at 100,000 RPM and in the middle of a great run. Can you take the viewers back a bit and tell us how you started out? I mean, what is your background and what made you become a lawyer and how did you succeed?
Oh man, gosh. Well, I'm a second generation lawyer. The old man, or as I say, the old man, my father was a distinguished trial lawyer in Illinois, was the only Black lawyer in Will County for probably 20 years from the 60s to the 80s. And I grew up watching him try cases all over the state of Illinois. I was a big fan of his, and he had a powerful presence in court. And I would stay up at night waiting for the phone to ring in Joliet, Illinois, for one of my father's clients or potential clients who had gotten arrested. And back then, you could go and get them out of jail the same evening if you could get a judge to sign an order. Maybe you can still do that now, but in D.C. and New York, it's not as prevalent. And I convinced my father and my mother to let me go with him because I was fascinated. I wanted to be just like my father after I heard him try a case in Collinsville, Illinois. And so they agreed that I could go with him and go into the jails and the penitentiaries. And back then you could take your clients out who were incarcerated and be responsible for them at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I was fascinated with this whole criminal justice system whereby I got to go to penitentiaries and jails around the police and the judges where no one else could, or you could, unless you had a law degree or you were law enforcement. And I was 8 to 10 years old and just fascinated by, I even romanced it at various times as a young man. But I knew early on that I wanted to be just like my father. I wanted to try cases like him. I wanted to be a lawyer as early as possible. And I wanted to be or have this exciting law career in representing white-collar criminal defendants, as well as I do regulatory litigation, as well as commercial litigation. And so it is my first love. It really is. I don't recommend people love the law as much as I do because, my two former wives, who I love dearly, who I have kids with, will say, that, Scott's a great guy, but that law game wins every time with him. And I don't know whether it's right or wrong or not, but I've got a love affair with the law game that as I approach 63, I see 70 up ahead. And the idea of not practicing law, of not having the passion to practice law, of not going to the office, of not getting a client to say yes to being retained by me and Reed Smith, it literally makes me sad. It literally makes me emotional. I'm going to miss it so much. But as you say, that day is coming, whether it's my reckoning with relevance or whether it's the reckoning that it's a young man's game. And at 70 or 65, whatever that date is that I decide, like you, I want to control it, but I'm not going to be very happy about it. I'm really not. And I struggle with that. And I'm trying to manage that emotional part of what I've done for the last 40 years, literally. I don't know if everyone has that level of passion, but from whence I came, my father loved the law. You would love practicing with him, against him, and in front of him, because he was not only just good, but he had a sense of humor like you and me that would keep you, whether you were his enemy or adversary, he would keep you in stitches at the, how should I say this, at the spontaneity of your argument, or the failure of your argument, or the flaws in your argument. And he would cut you or stab you, but he'd do it with a smile.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and that's the best way to have to face your failures when you've made a stumble. You know you're going to get stabbed, but at least if someone's smiling at you when you're doing it, you go, okay,
yeah, he was quite the assassin.
I can take the criticism a little bit better.
Right.
But before we get to the second half here, I'd love you to tell the viewers, you started out, you didn't have a big book of clients when you started. You started as a young lawyer, young associate, and you figured out ways to build your business. What are some of the ways, some of the advice you want to give our viewers on how you built such a large practice to become the Rainmaker of the Year, for example? I mean, that's a great honor, and that requires a lot of effort, time, and production. So how'd you do it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. If you want to be a litigator, then I recommend you go to the government first. DOJ, Public Defender Service, federal, state. I went to the New York Manhattan District Attorney's Office, tried 50 cases to trial, got great training. And so when I left there after 4 years, interviewed with Reed Smith and was brought on as a mid-level associate, I was primarily brought on because I had trial experience, right? Didn't have a clue on what a big law firm was. As an African-American lawyer, I didn't think that African-American lawyers hung around a long time at big white corporate law firms. That was a factor. But I figured because I was unemployed between jobs, I'd do this for 2 or 3 years, whatever once came my way, and then go and open up my own practice or run for office. Or I didn't really have a great game plan, but I knew I was going to Reed Smith. And in 1991, they were going to pay me $65,000 a year, which was double what I was making in the government in New York City with 4 roommates. And so I interviewed and, had great interviews and stuff. And, they made me the offer. And with that type of money back in 91, I was ready to start right away. I said, can I use this office? Let's get going right now. They said, don't you want to take a couple of days to think about it? I said, I could, but I prefer not. I haven't been working for the last 6 months or so. So I really did want to get back to practicing law. I was terrified of coming to a big corporate law firm, but I was eager to build relationships. For me, I've always believed in building relationships, being really well prepared. You couple that with talent, and good things are going to happen, whether you're in the courtroom or the boardroom or meeting with clients, right? I learned to court clients like I courted someone that I wanted to date. It very similar. The firm gets mad at me when I say this comparison, but it's true. I'm on your podcast, so I can say this. What do you do when you see someone that you want to date, right? You talk about them. You ask them a lot of questions. You're nice to them. You feed them. You're respectful of them. And of course, you always in the end, have to ask them out. Well, I got real comfortable and am comfortable asking clients out on a date, if you will. That is asking them for the business. Because if you don't ask them for the business, there's a lot of competition out there. Your competition is asking for the business. And so you better ask for it. Secondly, very quickly, for me as a litigator, trial lawyer, I told myself I was the greatest litigator God ever made. And what difference did it make if I was the greatest if no one knew who I was or how good I was? So I did two things. One, every time I could do a demonstration at Reed Smith with the litigation training groups, I stood up because I had tried cases. I had tried cases an hour, getting the file an hour before and going to court and trying the case to cover for somebody. That's the first thing. The second thing I did was anything that would give me name recognition publicly in Washington or elsewhere, I got involved in that case. I did. I represented people for free. I represented them pro bono. I cut my rates, athletes, entertainers, politicians primarily, but groups that were involved with the mayor's office, the mayor's campaign, congresspersons, so forth and so on, because their cases, their issues were in the newspaper. I wanted to be their lawyer to build my name recognition. And once I built my name recognition, then those phone calls would come. I wanted to be in the top 3 in Washington, at least, of the name of the lawyer, the white collar lawyer, the regulatory defense lawyer who they thought about calling. Because if they think about calling you, they're going to call you. And then thirdly, to get even more name recognition, I turned to political fundraising, asking people for money for an elected official or an incumbent. I didn't really care. I mean, the politics had to be reasonable, but I didn't put people in a room with others for a fundraiser at Reed Smith because I was deeply political. If I could get 50 business leaders in the room and I could have conversations with a minimum of 3 or 4, I would memorize what I wanted to talk to them about, whether it was Bob Johnson or R. Donahue Peebles or Jack Kemp, you name it, Republican, Democrat, it didn't really matter to me. I wanted to get them in a room at Reed Smith and chase business, literally. And the firm allowed me to do that. They had great facilities and stuff. And then I became lawyers to various political campaigns. I became the general counsel to the DC Chamber of Commerce. I eventually became head of the Chamber of Commerce, and then also head of the DC Democratic Party. All high-profile positions, but at the same time, still chasing business, right? I was a source for political and legal stories in the Washington Post. I started doing political commentary and legal commentary locally and nationally. But in the end, it was all about name recognition, because if I had name recognition, which I have a lot of right now, sometimes people call me and say, Scott, this is a high profile case. It'll be good for your practice. I tell them I need more high profile matters, or I need more publicity, like I need a hole in the head at this point. Right. So that's really not a selling point. So in any event, I would eventually do legal and political commentary. I certainly have a contract with News Nation now, and I'm on almost daily with them. But it's all about name recognition and building out my practice, getting people to say yes. Because you see, we're no longer in the legal business. You think I'm practicing law, and my partners think they're practicing law, and my competitors think they're practicing law. We're really not practicing law anymore. We really aren't. We're in the legal sales business because you're presumed to be excellent, right? Right. You're presumed to be able to win a case or dissect the issues, talk to the client, give them advice and counsel. That's almost presumed if you're in a top 25 law firm, maybe top 50, top 100, right? So what's the value differential? The value differential is getting the client to say yes versus your competitors. And that takes sales. If you're not interested in building relationships, if you're not interested in selling legal services, and I'm always on, I'm always selling, then you really don't need to be in the practice of law, because that's all that's left right now. Because we're so sophisticated that you got to be able to sell. And if you're the best and nobody knows your name, it doesn't matter.
Not going to matter.
Because you're not being hired by anyone.
You make a couple of points that I'd like to focus on for just a few seconds. Your dating analogy is excellent. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I tell young lawyers that when you meet someone, if you start selling yourself immediately, they're turned off.
Mm-hmm.
If you start respecting them, if you try to learn more and more about them, like then make them believe you care about them,
Mm-hmm.
that you care a lot about them, then they're going to reciprocate and care about you, and you're going to get much better leads on business if that you get that person to think that you care about what their concerns are, where they're from, what they care about, and the more you learn about that and program into yourself, then you get to the point where you can very easily say, "I'd like to be your lawyer," whatever is going
Yeah.
on. Too many lawyers, young lawyers in particular, think that they've got to have that elevator speech where in 5 minutes they have to tell them your complete resume. I mean, there's nothing
Right.
worse than the elevator speech. When
Right.
I counsel young attorneys, I go, get rid of the elevator speech. Forget it. Your elevator speech should be, if nothing else, just tell me about yourself.
Yeah, I
The
say it a
person you
little
met.
differently, but I agree with you. I talk about the likability factor.
Yeah,
People
likability, same
like
thing.
doing business with people they like.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
so instead of the elevator speech, right? You've done your research on the client, hopefully, whether it's a pitch or whether it's just a social
Mhm,
affair,
mhm.
retail business development, right? Ask the client about everything but the law. Ask
Right,
them about
exactly.
their alma mater, their
Yeah,
family, their hobbies, or you've read something about them, or they're involved in something. Just talk about everything but the law, because then getting them to like you means they're going to do business with you, or they're going to be easy to do business with you. I do legal and political commentary. Everybody doesn't agree with my commentary. When I go meet with a client or pitch a potential client,
mhm.
when I walk in the door, not only do they know my name, they've seen my commentary, which is moderate on the Democratic side, right? But I've done all the networks and what have you. And the first thing they want to talk, whether they're black or white, male, female, conservative, Democrat, the first thing they want to talk about is my commentary and politics and so forth and so on. And I know people say, don't talk politics or religion with your clients, blah, blah, blah. I don't. I listen to what they have to
Right,
say.
exactly. Well,
And,
that point you make there is the other critical advice I try to give the younger attorneys.
mm-hmm,
Face the reality, you are a commodity.
mm-hmm,
That there's a lawyer out there who can do the job just as well as you can do it.
yeah,
Face that
yeah,
reality. And the only way you're going to build your practice and get to is to build your brand. You've got to become a brand. It's
yeah,
what in marketing they call a unique selling proposition. I
mm-hmm,
often talk to people, I'll be in front of an audience, I'll say, everybody who buys Clorox bleach, raise your hand. And half the people raise their hand.
right,
And I said, do you realize that that store brand is identical in every respect to the Clorox bleach, but you're buying it because of the name. It's got a brand. And you've got to
right,
do that as a lawyer. And Scott, one of the things I admire most about you is how, and you just went through the litany of how you did it, how you built the brand of A. Scott Bolden.
yeah,
It's beyond the person. You are a brand. So that when you can build a brand like you've built for yourself, like you say, the moment you walk into the room, you command the room.
yeah,
You can be with
yeah,
5 other lawyers in that room. Doesn't matter. Scott Bolden's in that room, and
yep,
he's the brand, and that is something that requires all the efforts that you talked about, the doing pro bono work when you can, getting out there on the press, getting in the ratings things, every single thing you can, getting on
yeah,
social media. That's all about building brand. But so many lawyers don't do that. I recently gave just a real quick one, then we'll get back to
mm-hmm,
your thoughts here. I gave a presentation on building business to a law firm, and I took off their website the opening lines of the biographies that they had on their website.
mm-hmm,
And so it said so and so is a litigator who does this. So and so is a real estate attorney who does this. So and so, absolutely nothing unique whatsoever in the opening sentence. Nothing.
mm-hmm,
So then I popped up some other people I know. And it started off with so and so is the Hall of Fame this, or so and so accomplished this. I said, that's it. One's a commodity, one is not. So every single detail of building your brand is
mm-hmm.
critical, and you've done a phenomenal job at that. And
Thank
I
you.
believe that much of a lot of your business is derived out of the fact that you are a brand, and that
Yeah,
people therefore trust you.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why they go up and they buy the more expensive dish detergent than the cheaper stuff because they trust that dish detergent that's made by Procter and Gamble. They
Yeah,
trust A. Scott Bolden more
yeah,
than they're going to trust some other kid who might be just as good as you as a lawyer, but not nearly as good as you as a brand.
One thing I want to raise with you is there are lots of different ways, and I know you'll agree with it, on how to build your brand. Right. So I just went through a litany of how I built my brand. You talked about building a brand as a concept, but you've got to find your practice development voice, as I say. Your branding approach may be that you write a lot of legal articles, that you're the expert in this area like no other. It's a niche area. You're going to own that space. Or you speak on panels all around the country or the world, right? What is your practice development voice? What are you really good at getting people to say yes? Now, I do retail business development really, really well. I do pitches really, really well because I get them talking about everything but the law before we start talking about their project because the likability factor. But there are lots of different ways to build your brand. You have to be fearless in building your brand. You couldn't find another partner in Washington, D.C. that listened to my story and agree with me. It's non-traditional. It's not working under a partner and then the partner bringing you to the partnership and getting you voted in and so forth and so on. I made partner in 4 years. That's right, in 4 years. By 1995, I was a partner, and at that time, we were office-based managed. And I negotiated my partnership. I had about $500,000 in business. It wasn't even litigation. It was real estate, and it was some real estate tax appeal work, but it was very lucrative, the deals I cut with these clients. $500,000 worth of business in 95 was a lot of business, right? I literally negotiated my partnership with John Wood and a few others from the senior management committee, Dan Booker. And when I say I negotiated, what I said was, I want to go up. I want you to put me up. My hours are great. I work hard. My writing is fine, what have you. But I got a $500,000 book. I can turn it into $1 million if you make me partner. And so I had the statistics, but I had that business. And I shared that business with my partners, real estate partners, other litigators who were partners. And you know what? They were open to it. Now, at the time, I didn't argue this, but at the time, the other elephant was in the room was I was the only black lawyer in the DC office in 95.
Whatever works.
And nobody had a local practice like litigation practice I did in DC. Yeah. And so that helped some, but that wasn't my first argument. That was my last argument.
Right.
And I'm not ashamed of that. But I said, and by the way, guys, this helps us a lot. And so I got them to agree to it. And watch this now. And I'd love to get your reaction to this. My associates who worked with me, when they found out that I had made partner, I was up for partner, they went like this to me, Jim Flood and others. They went, Art Wyatt, they said, it's like a partner already. What's the big deal? And they were right, because I had business, I was managing clients, and I was managing partners in 1995 as a fifth year or fourth year associate. But I was always about the firm and always about the client. So I was comfortable with working with partners and stuff.
Right.
Internal branding and external branding. You got to do both.
You do. Absolutely. I have this matrix, I call it bingo, promotion bingo or business bingo. And it's a matrix of like a bingo card. And in marketing, the lesson of marketing is that you have to touch a person at least 7 times with your brand before they'll remember your brand. It's been studies done and that kind of stuff. So I have the names of the people inside the firm that you need to know. And across the other way are the boxes to fill in how many times you talked to them, saw them, or whatever, to build your identity there. Because what I explain to people is when someone comes up for partnership and they have the same identical stats, but the one person they know and the other person they don't know, who's going to get the deal? Who's going to get the promotion? So I mean, it's very kind of simple things. But you said one other thing that I would love to hear more on. You use the word sharing with your other partners. And so often you run into folks who are very tight-fisted with their business. They're afraid to allow others into their room with the business that they have. You don't have that attitude. You bring people in, you let people work on your clients. Tell a little bit more about how that helps build your practice.
Well, one thing that people miss about my practice, even when I was an associate, is I really learned about the firm. At that time, we had 3 offices: Pittsburgh, I think Philly, Harrisburg, and DC. We would eventually go to Virginia and New York, and then, of course, we're 35 offices now. But I studied the firm when I decided that, one, I didn't want to go the traditional route. 2, I really wanted to be partner as soon as possible because of my legal sales approach. But I studied what we were good at and what we weren't good at. I studied because cross-selling, while it's a little more sophisticated, getting them to say yes, I wanted to be part of my repertoire, not just litigation work, because that can be expensive. But if I could cross-sell my partners and associates, right, that's just another, that's another level of selling. Again, we're in the legal sales business. And so I learned about real estate, healthcare, corporate transaction. I learned about our capabilities in it, right? So if I would cross-sell. As far as my direct sell, I'd cross-sell too, insurance recovery. I knew what our capabilities were. So that gave me an added piece in my sales repertoire. And so sharing, you got to share if you cross-sell now, because I didn't know a damn thing about real estate. And you got to trust your partners. Nobody ever tried to take a client from me until years later, until we were really big. But I had a niche group of partners that I worked with who were very supportive of me. They were mentors, but they were friends as well, because remember, we're building relationships. Clients as well as partners, you build internal, external, the in and out. Right. And so they really wanted to see me succeed. And watch this. They were part of my success because I was bringing them work. I was bringing the RTC work. Young people don't remember what the Resolution Trust Corporation was, right. But that was a big client of mine. And Brian Johnson and others in DC loved doing this work. So I'm bringing them work. They're talking to the clients, or the clients are talking to me, and I'm coming to them. I'm not telling them you do X, Y, and Z, and I need it by Wednesday. Oh, no, no, no. I would say, I talk to the client. The client has this concern. Let's get on the phone with them and let you and I sort through it with them. But you're the expert, right? And so I never was uncomfortable working with the partners. Never, because it was all about the client and the firm. And I led with that. And they were very comfortable working with me. Now, I could be CRL, but I had to have a partner. When you're associated, Reed Smith, at least back then, I had to have a partner be the matter responsible attorney for insurance purposes. Exactly, yeah. And I would take MOA, give them MOA. All I cared about was CRL, client responsible, because that was my best selling point. My highest and best value to Reed Smith has always been client responsible, rainmaking. Those numbers under my name, under CRL, is what I get paid for. That's it.
So our viewers understand what you're talking about is the credit system that Reed Smith uses between client responsible, matter originator, whatever it is. All law firms have those kinds of things. But what I stress to young attorneys is, in the end of the day, whichever one of those factors that your firm uses to figure out your credits, the one that's the rainmaker one is the one you want to build. You want to build that as big, because that's the work that others are going to do. Right. And the more others are doing the work that you originated from the client, the bigger your practice would be. I used to have a partner in my old firm who every year would generate a little over $1 million a year. I could count on that year after year after year. And I went to him one day. I said, Kenny, if you were to delegate some of this work, if you were to bring some of your partners into your world of what the work that you're doing, that $1 million would be $2 million overnight. You can easily double it by sharing, by bringing in other people. But he just shook his head. He said, no, this is my practice, this is what I do. I said, okay, fine. Then you'll be compensated for $1 million book of business, but you're never going to get hired. You see that at so many law firms where you look at a person's production and you can see a very wide swath of partners who are at a plateau. They're all about the same level. Some places it's 2 million, might be 3 million, whatever it is. And they never get above that. But they never really fall below it. They are good for that amount of work every single year. They're workers, and that's great. But I used to smile and say, to not directly to them, and go, thank you very much for being in that level and giving me the money you're giving me, because I'm way up here with my practice And
Mhm.
if I get high enough in a rainmaker practice, you're going to get compensated well no matter what.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different sort of a system that every law firm has, but you got to know how to play that system. And the only way you play that system successfully is to share.
Well, you can't do all the work though.
You
If
can't
you get
exactly.
above 2 million a year in most firms,
Right.
if you want to be 5, 10 million, right? You can't do all that work
You can't.
and have a family and have a life. So you're going to have to share it, and you're going to have to cross sell it or share it within the litigation group. In my case, because you got to have competent people do it. You can't be everything to everyone. And here's one other point I want to make. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I have clients who call me and say, Scott, I'm not going to give you this piece of business because your presentation was awesome, but I don't need a hammer on this. I don't need a hammer. I don't need you and your brand on this. I can get this done without your brand because of that, the dynamics with this litigation or dynamics with this dispute, right? If you walk in with me, they are going to do two things. They're either going to back up and not want to talk, or they're going to want to fight, and they're going to bring in another high-profile litigator, and this is something that can go away. I want to make it go away. And I know you're capable of making it go away, but you settle from a position of strength, not weakness. And your brand, just walking in the room, I've had clients tell me this, right? It's going to change this dynamic, Scott.
Yep.
So that's why I'm not giving you the business.
I remember one occasion where a relatively large matter financially coming into the firm, and we did the pitch. I had a similar experience to you. The client brought me in and said, Doug, the pitch was great, but I don't need a Rolls Royce. I just need a Volkswagen.
Yeah. Or a Chevy.
He said, so go get me a Volkswagen. I said, okay, fine. I mean,
right.
Both of us have enjoyed the ego building reality of being a brand. And when you walk in, there's a whole nice environment with that. But with that, you're not going to do that. And like you said, you're never going to get above that 2 million, whatever the number is, until you learn how to share the work with others and trust it. You may lose a client over the course of your career now and again, but for the most part, you just build it back up again. You said something earlier that I'd love to hear more thoughts on as we get into sort of the second phase of this that we'll cover only briefly. But how do you relax? How do you, I know you have a passion for the law, a passion for your clients. How do you turn that off? What do you do to turn that off and just be, Scott the guy?
Man, I'm still working on that with my therapist.
That's all right.
You've heard the saying that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
I've taken that to the extreme. I will say this, that in the last 10, 15 years, I've learned that relaxing is really important through my relationships with my second wife, and through other significant women who have been in my life, whether they're my sister or my daughters who are 30 years old now, one's 40, the two are 30. I've got a young son at Morehouse College who is 21, who I love, who is my bonus son, as we say. And relaxing is tough because if you've got a big law practice, there's always more to be done. Either managing people, managing the client, or managing the matter. But what do I do to relax? I love old movies. Me and my father used to sit up on Sundays and watch old movies. Back then, it was the equivalent of the Turner Classic Movies, TMC or TCM, right? And it was called Movie Greats. And when I was younger, I would pronounce it Movie Greets. But I distinctly remember sitting in his lap as a kid watching these old movies, film noir, because my father worked just like I do, a lot. Nobody complained about it because he was the sole breadwinner for a number of years. But I would see my father on on weekday mornings getting dressed before we went to school. Would never see him in the evenings, hardly ever. But that was okay because he was out working, he was working late. And then on Friday evenings, he would go with my uncle Thurkel Poole, who was about 6'4".
Sounds like a character from some major
major
novel.
He looked like the black Mr. Clean on the cleaning bottle. He was about 6'4", 250, not an ounce of fat on him. And he just looked, he was a handsome guy, but he was a menacing guy. And on Fridays, when my father's clients would get paid, there were a lot of, you go to the factory, there'd be factory workers, blah, blah, blah. He was the only white collar guy in the city who was an African American. And so he and my uncle would go to the bars and the restaurants and the hangouts in Joliet, Illinois to collect his fees, because on payday, they knew they would be at the bars and nightclubs spending his money. Now, this is a sole practitioner in the 60s and 70s. Now, this wasn't really sophisticated stuff here. And so I distinctly remember them being out on Friday nights on payday, right, every 2 weeks, and going out, and they'd come home at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and my mother would get up, and we had this big living room table, and Mr. Poole and my father would just dump literally bags of money on the table, right? $10 and $20 and pop, no hundreds, because these were working class people, and the table would be covered because I would be peeking out of the hallway because I was fascinated by this, and my mother would count the money. This is so true. This is so true. My mother would count the money and put it in piles and would write on top of, have a piece of paper of what bill she was going to pay with this collection effort. We were all in parochial schools. I was at Providence, New Lenox, and my sister was at St. Francis of Assisi. And so, that's how they paid the bills. And so I don't think my father made more than 50, maybe 75 grand at any one time. And then he went to the bench and got a huge pension, blah, blah, blah. But I'm fascinated with how a small practice works. We do the same thing in big law. We just don't do it as crude as that.
It's just a moving the decimal. Just
right.
The decimal point. That's all it is. Yeah.
And so this is my family foundation. This is my professional foundation from where I come from, basically.
So let me ask you.
So that was part of the fascination. But yeah.
Well, let me ask you this then. That's one of the great stories. And I know you have many of those great stories inside you.
Yeah.
I always, as you know, I publish books. And my publisher said to me, when I talked to her a little bit about practice, she said, "You've got to write a memoir." So I said, "No, what am I writing that for?" And she said, "Well, write it because it'll sell, number one, because that's all she cares about. But more importantly," she said, "it leaves a legacy that you've probably not told your children, probably haven't told people. And you may have had a story here, a story there, but it's never been collected for them to remember you and for your grandchildren to remember you for what you did in your life and in your career."
Yeah.
If you haven't written your memoir yet, Scott, you must do it.
Yeah.
You must do it for your legacy and for your children and your children's children.
Oh, it's coming.
Because someday they're going to want to say, "Hey, Grandpa Bolden was this."
Yeah.
And it's going to make a huge difference. And part of that, when I decided it was time for me to give it up and to move on for a variety of reasons, going through that cathartic exercise of going through my career and in my life, basically, and what I experienced throughout my life was a very beneficial bridge to making the transition, because I could see the arc. People when most people don't see the getting up to the arc, they just see this arc up here.
Yeah.
And it looks like a cliff to them, as opposed to just a journey. There's a natural journey. So writing these things was very cathartic for me, and I hope everybody out there I urge people to do it. And someone with as colorful a career and life as you have had, Scott, I mean, it would be, first of all, it would be a great read. There's no better storyteller than you are.
Yeah, buddy. It's
it's
coming. Although I will tell you, my daughters, I've tried to get all three of them, and even my son Cole, to go and get a law degree and practice law. And all four of them say, "Daddy, I don't want to work as hard as you do."
There you go.
And I say, "Well, just don't work as hard as me. Just work smarter than me, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to love it as much." But I do think it would be a good read. My father's book. I interviewed my father for 5 years before he passed away. And those recordings of his relationship with my mom, his relationship with us, his relationship with his adversaries in the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s are just incredible. I mean, his dissertation of them is just really incredible. And so I think you're right. We all have a book in this. We all have a book in this.
We do. And there's so many stories, and yours with your father and your mother and your family and what you've accomplished, Scott, are one of those kinds of success stories that are inspiring to so many people. And I hope they inspire some of the folks who are watching us today, because that's why I wanted you on, because I knew you would be an inspiration for anybody who's watching this podcast. As a last word, Scott, the viewers here are lawyers who are at all sorts of places in their careers, in the beginning of the career, the end of the career, whatever. As a lawyer, what would be the one thing you want to say to practicing lawyers about what they do and what they should want to accomplish?
Well, the law is a jealous lover. You got to love her, because she's not going away if you're practicing law. She will take everything you've got and demand more of what you don't have. You can sort your listeners can sort through that, right? She'll take everything you got, at least professionally, and demand more of what you don't have, because the passion for practicing law, if you're not going to practice with passion, right, then you probably need to be thinking about something else. What is you start this whole analysis. I'm talking about when you're young, whether you're professional or not. I'm talking about when you're 10 years old, 15 years old. The whole journey starts with, what is your passion? I didn't struggle with that because I found mine early in the law, and my father had a great tutor and mentor. By the way, never pushed me into the law. It was my choice. My parents said to all three of us, brother and sister, you find your passion and we will do everything we can to make you achieve those goals and objectives, to be the best. Because if you're not going to be the best, then it doesn't matter. If you're not giving back 50% with your passion, you can make all the money you want, but you're only living life at 50% because the other 50% is given back. If you're not doing that, right, then you're not living this full life. So passion is really important, and really figuring out what you want to do. Secondly, you're going to fail. I can tell you lots of failures in my career. You read off my successes, and my successes, they're there, and I love it. But the failures, it's like the iceberg. You see the beauty of an iceberg. Underneath, you see the failures and despair, disappointments, heartbreak, revenge, people turning on you, people hating your success, people bad-mouthing you to clients in order to get the business, which is never the answer. It is never the answer. Clients don't like it, and lawyers that do that don't last very long or aren't successful, right? Mm-hmm. What do you do with failure, right? You can leave the firm if you want. You can yell and scream if you want, or you can pick yourself up. Remember the greatness. Remember how much you love yourself and love what you're doing, and move forward. Because for me, after every success, this keeps me grounded too, Doug. After every failure in my life has come success. And after every success has come failure. It's true. It is. It is God's way of keeping us grounded. But more importantly, if you are of Christian belief, or if you believe in, if you're spiritual, if you believe in whatever God you call him, I believe he's ordered our steps. What a blessing it has been for me, for the steps that he's ordered for me, right? And so part of my job in life is to follow his will and to pray for his will, right? So when I fail, part of my resolution emotionally is, well, clearly the Lord didn't want that for me. What does he want for me?
Now what does he want?
maybe I was listening to my voice, not the Lord's voice. When you got an ego like mine, you can start listening to your voice and stuff.
That's sometimes that
but the
all those voices in your head.
That's right. But the spirituality piece is really important.
Yeah,
and then lastly, treat others, respect this profession. Respect the lawyers. Whether you win or lose, respect it. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few professions, Doug, tell me if you agree with this. It's one of the few professions that has not changed over 100, 200 years. We still fundamentally practice law the same, right? Doctors with medical advances, they practice medicine differently. Newspapers and the media are very different. Architecture has changed with the technology, AI, and all these things. But we're fundamentally practicing law, notwithstanding technology and what have you. Yep. We're fundamentally still writing briefs. We're writing wills. We're writing contracts. We're negotiating. We're litigating and in trial the same way.
And lawyers,
what a beautiful profession to be part of.
Unbelievably beautiful. And the key here that you're talking about is the great lawyers know how to do that planning for their clients every single day. They do fabulous jobs for their clients, but they do lousy jobs for themselves. They don't plan their own case, as it were, particularly when they get into the tail end of their careers. They're either engrossed in still representing clients, and at the same time they're not using that same incredible business acumen it's business acumen, it's sales, it's planning, it's all the things that you learn at Harvard Business School or whatever. But we just do it in the law for other people. What I try to stress is do it for yourself occasionally. Yeah. Plan for yourself. Plan like you're the client, and where do you want to end up at the end of the game? As a client, and represent yourself in that context, you'll get to a better result. Well, Scott, I can't thank you enough for being a guest today. I knew it was going to be great. It was even better than I thought it would be. And as much as you're a great lawyer and you're a great celebrity on so many broadcast stations or whatever it is, deep down inside, you're a preacher, Scott. I can see it. You're a preacher. And I think that's just a fantastic thing about you. So thank you, Scott, for being on the show. And I wish you the best of luck. And I know that I'll be seeing you I'll see you on the screen real soon.
Hey, listen, I'd love to come back anytime. I love what you're doing. I love your books, and I love how you talk to young people and lawyers about Dawn to Dusk. So you keep doing your thing as well, Doug. Love you to death, brother.
Thank you. Okay, folks. So that's the end of the podcast. I know it was enjoyable for all the viewers and listeners. I hope that you'll tune in again next time. Until then, have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on the Dawn to Dusk podcast. You can learn more on building and transitioning a multi-million-dollar law practice in Doug's book, From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. If you're interested in working with Doug, suggesting future guests, or have questions you'd like Doug to ask guests in upcoming episodes, reach out to him at douglas.wood@wood.law. Or visit his website at dawntodusk.wood.law. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your peers. Until next time, we appreciate your viewership.